The United Kingdom is made up of England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. It has a long history as a major player in international affairs and fulfills an important role in the EU, UN, and NATO. Britain was the world's first industrialized country. Its economy remains one of the largest, but it has for many years been based on service industries rather than on manufacturing. The United Kingdom's economy is dependent on foreign trade. The government supports free and unrestricted trade and has championed international trade organizations, such as the World Trade Organization and the EU. Because of its dependency on trade, the British have few restrictions on foreign trade and investment. The United Kingdom has trade treaties with 90 different nations. The strength of the British pound and the state of economy has made the United Kingdom an attractive investment area for foreign investors. The kingdom is the world's second largest destination for investment. About 30% of all foreign investment going into the EU is directed at the United Kingdom. The British also invest heavily in other nations. The gross domestic product or GDP is one of the primary indicators used to gauge the health of a country's economy. It represents the total dollar value of all goods and services produced over a specific time period. You can think of it as the size of the economy. Usually, GDP is expressed as a comparison to the previous quarter or year. Gross domestic product is defined by OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, as an aggregate measure of production equal to the sum of the gross values added of all resident institutional units engaged in production, plus any taxes and minus any subsidies on products not included in the value of their outputs. United Kingdom's GDP is dropped drastically in 2008 until 2009. The United Kingdom entered recession on those years. It can be seen from the graph that the GDP has decreased from 0.2% in quarter 2 and 1.7% in the third quarter and 2.2% in the fourth quarter. It shows that the United Kingdom has a huge recession in 2008 started from the second quarter. It was because the housing bubbles and the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers. The London and UK housing bubble is part of the overall post-2009 Northern and Western European housing bubble that has inflated because of the strong investment inflows that these countries have attracted since the global financial crisis due to their perceived economy safe haven status. Serving to further inflate these countries' pre-existing property bubbles that had expanded from the mid-1990s until 2008. UK housing prices have nearly quadrupled from the mid-1990s to 2008, briefly fell 20% in 2009 and have since rebounded enough to keep property prices firmly in the stratosphere. UK property prices are very overvalued, currently valued at 128% of their historic price-to-income ratio and 140% of their historic price-to-rent ratio. In a pattern similar to France, the UK housing bubbles since 2008 has been primarily driven by the price gains in the capital city of London. Prime London housing prices rose a hearty 11.4% in the 12 months to October 2011, up 40% from their post-credit crunch low, while most other investment markets fell in a very volatile year. It is widely agreed that a series of collapsing housing market bubbles triggered the global financial crisis of 2008 until 2009, along with the severe recession that followed. The biggest contributor of the recession is Lehman Brothers, the fourth largest investment bank. There were so many people that relying on them to take a loan from them to invest in the property. As in early 2000, people thought that property prices will never fall, but this statement has failed. Low interest rate and surprisingly boom on the price of properties boost up investors to invest as many as they can into the properties by any means, using the large amount of loan taken from the banks. As the housing bubble burst, the investors cannot even pay the interest of the loan to the bank since the value of properties suddenly dropped. The property suddenly drop is caused by too many ownership of properties, people with less money, more loan, and even more properties. It is very risky. Too many ownership of properties will cause the price of properties keep on going up since it is investor speculation. The demand of properties was also decreased since the many people could not even buy one of them. When the properties price dropped, Investors cannot even pay the interest to the banks, and 80% loan that was taken from the bank was in the form of property loan. So banks lost its money, liquidity, big amount of money freeze. The peak of the recession was the fall of Lehman Brothers, where they were the main bank that provided property loan. The UK investors used their loan services to buy properties. Recession affecting unemployment in the year, but the increase of employment in 2008 was not as high as the first recession in World War II, even though the 2008 recession had griever affection. It was not worse as the first due to greater labor market flexibility, encouraging firms to keep on workers. A fall in labor productivity, meaning that firms have been willing to keep on workers despite falling output. Benefits changes making it harder to get job seekers allowance and encouraging more people to seek for jobs. A consumer price index or CPI measures changes in the price level of a market basket of consumer goods and services purchased by households. The CPI is a statistical estimate constructed using the prices of an example of representative items whose prices are collected periodically. The annual percentage change in the CPI is used as a measure of inflation. Most countries, the CPI is, along with the population census, and one of the most closely watched national economic statistics. The chart shows the growth of CPI in the middle of 2008. Record high oil prices were feeding through the higher prices of the goods and increased energy bills, and a fall in the value of sterling also forced up the cost of imported goods. But by early 2009, the price of crude oil has slumped, losing 2/3 of its value in just 6 months, and the global recession has taken hold. In the UK, VAT or value added tax was also cut from 17.5% to 15% in an effort to stimulate spending. All of this contributed to the inflation rate falling. Then VAT went back up to 17.5% at the beginning of 2010 and was increased further to 20% the following year. Big rises in the gas and electricity bills along with the transport costs and food prices pushed prices up further. Since then, the price of inflation has subsidized as the impact of VAT rises and higher energy costs have fallen away. In 7 years to 2009, UK employees' median hourly earnings grew by 3.7% a year, on average in nominal or current price terms. With relatively low inflation, median real earnings in 2012 constant prices grew by 1.6% a year on average. Since 2009, average nominal earnings of UK employees have remained quite flat, with consumer price index inflation averaging 3.7% in the 12 months to April 2010, 2011, and 2012. There was a sharp fall in median earnings in real terms from the peak of £12.25 per hour in 2009 to £11.21 per hour in 2012. Roughly the same as the real value in 2003. This may be because of payment freezes for people who remain in the same job or may reflect changes in the composition of jobs that people do, with some high-paid jobs being cut as the economy adjusts following the shock of 2008 and 2009, and more low-paid jobs being created. The average earnings outcome for UK employees as a whole is probably the result of a combination of both pay freezes and economy restructuring. UK has made several policies under monetary and fiscal to overcome the global recession going on in 2008. Talking about monetary policy, UK government has implemented monetary policy as follows. In recession, UK cut interest rates to try and stimulate spending and investment. It should also weaken the exchange rate, which will help exports. However, in some situations, monetary policy may be insufficient. In the recession of 2008 until 2009, there was a liquidity trap. Cuts in interest rates were insufficient to encourage spending and investment. For example, banks had insufficient credit so were unwilling to lend despite low interest rates. Confidence was very low, and house prices were falling, reducing consumer wealth. With deflation, interest rates may be insufficient because falling prices can make real interest rates quite high. Therefore, zero interest rates may not get an economy out of the recession. During the credit crunch of 2008 until 2009, the Bank of England also used quantitative easing. as a part of monetary policy. This involves creating money electronically to buy assets, or such as government bonds from banks. In monetary policy, government of UK also had implied fiscal policy to help the economy. Following the financial crisis, a range of new policy measures has been implemented by the government and the Bank of England. Fiscal stimulus during the recession of 2008 until 2009 has been followed by deficit reduction on the part of government. The Bank of England cut interest rates into a historic low of 0.5%, where they remain. In 2009, the government pursued expansionary fiscal policy. In response to a deep recession, our GDP fell 6%, the government cut VAT in a bid to boost customer spending. This caused a big rise in government borrowing in 2009 until 2010. Government borrowing also rose because of the recession, leading to lower tax revenue. And when the new coalition government came into power in May 2010, they argued the deficit was too high, and then announced plans to reduce government borrowing. This involved spending limits. These austerity measures were a factor in causing lower economic growth in 2011 and 2012. Those policies that has been applied during recession, expansionary monetary policy should cause higher economic growth and lower unemployment. It will also cause a higher rate of inflation. To some extent, the expansionary monetary policy of 2008 helped economic recovery, but the recovery was weaker than expected, showing limitations of monetary policy. The recession of 2008 until 2009 was very deep. The UK was hard hit by credit crunch and knocked to financial sector. Despite interest rate cut and £200 billion of quantitative easing, the economy was quite slow to recover. In 2011, this weak recovery petered out. However, without the expansionary monetary policy, the recession could have been even deeper. Also, the double-dip recession of 2011 until 2012 was partly caused by the tightening of fiscal policy, or higher tax and lower spending. UK has been limited in its ability to take optional fiscal action by the significant burden that bank bailouts have had on public finances. This has contributed to a significant rise in the deficit on an estimated £175 billion, or 12.4% of GDP, in 2009 until 2010, and a rise in the national debt above 80% of GDP at its peak. Furthermore, the UK has significant automatic stabilizers, which have contributed far more than the optional action, and more than most other countries. As a result, further optional fiscal action is unlikely. UK's taken policy to overturn the crisis resulted in the concluded 2014 current economic of the nations. The preliminary estimate of the gross domestic product indicated that the UK economy grew by 0.8% in Q2 2014. This is the sixth successive quarter of output growth, contributing to annual growth of 3.1%, the highest rate since Q4 2007. On current estimates, UK GDP re-attained its pre-downturn peak in Q2 2014. Growth in the UK's three largest services industries accounts for much of the growth over this period, although output growth has accelerated across a broad range of industries over the last years. Analysis of past revision to GDP suggests that these tend to be relatively small, although both the size and variation have changed through time. There were reductions in both the size and variation of GDP revisions in the early 1990s following methodological improvements. The recent reduction in unemployment is mostly a result of a fall in the number of people moving from employment to unemployment, or job separation. Lower job separation has contributed to recent reductions in the term of unemployment rate, which is now below its 2000 until 2007 average. The rate of hiring from among the unemployed has changed relatively little on average since the end of the downturn, and it's remained well below the pre-downturn average. The same is true for the short-term unemployed, but the hiring rate has risen to its highest level in a decade for the long-term unemployed. She has released the latest forecast of country's economy for several years ahead. The forecast concluded as follows. For future inflation, in annual average terms, forecasting annual CPI inflation at 1.8% in 2014, 1.9% in 2015, and 2% in 2016. In Q2 predicted 1.9% in 2014, 2% in 2015, and 2.1% in 2016. Unemployment will be as followed. The new forecast envisages that the UK unemployment rate will fall from 6.4% in Q2 2014 to 5.5% in Q2 2015, and 5% in Q2 2016, and to 4.9% in Q2 2017. And it is expected to fall faster. The growth interest rate will be the first increase in official interest rates to 0.75% expected in Q1 in 2015.